Dancer's Enchanted swords are among the most critically regarded weapons in Dark Souls 3, and for good reason. The way the attack rating is displayed is extremely misleading to newer players and often results in a 630 AR weapon doing only like 180 damage on an R1. Now, before we actually look at how to build and use the weapon as well as you can, let's look at why it does so little damage despite its monstrous attack rating. So first off, the actual damage displayed includes both blades. Now the blade on the right does magical, while the blade on the left does fire, and both do the physical portion as well. This means an R1 would only do the physical and magical portion, ignoring the roughly 200 AR of fire damage that you actually get. To put things very simply, the AR of the Dancer's Enchanted Swords on a single blade is about 200 less than what is indicated on the screen. Next, split damage is heavily punished in Dark Souls 3 due to how defense works. The roughly 220 physical damage gets reduced to about 140, which is then reduced by absorption, which, averages around 20%. Next, the roughly 190 magical damage gets reduced to about 110 damage, which is then reduced by absorption again. This is how your 630 AR weapon is suddenly doing 190 damage on basic R1s. So, what a lot of people do to make up for the effects of split damage is heavily focus on the offensive stats. You'll see crazy builds with 16 Vigor and 40 Strength, Dex, Int, and Faith, or you'll see attempts to ignore the physical portion of the scaling and just go solely for Int and Faith to maximize their magical damage. People also try using Karthus Beacon and the Pontiff Rings to enhance their damage after multiple hits. I've seen Power Within, Sacred Oath, Red Tearstone builds, all trying to make a last-ditch effort to make the weapon actually do damage. And after extensive testing, I can safely say that none of these are a smart idea if you're looking for efficiency. Now, below 20 Vigor is, a death sentence. The swords actually scale better with physical damage compared to magical damage. Karthus Beacon lasts an insultingly short amount of time and barely benefits from the multi-hit property. Sacred Oath is near useless in PvP, Power Within does way too much self-damage and can be avoided, and Red Tearstone requires you to be near death. So what do you do to build the Dancer's Enchanted Swords in the best way? And sadly, like most builds in Dark Souls 3, the answer is a standard quality build. You get an effective damage increase of about 1 to 2 points per point of intelligence invested, and about 1 point per point of faith invested. Basically, you should never invest damage attributes into something if the return ratio is less than like 2 to 1, unless you just simply have spare stats and you're a higher level. Additionally, you shouldn't rely on gimmicks like Karthus Beacon or the Pontiff Rings because it pigeonholes you into playing only a single playstyle, which, even an average player can recognize and adjust for. Being unpredictable is key, and if you have a very clear damage stacking gimmick, you are stuck being aggressive and stuck into one playstyle. If you don't be aggressive, you're just wasting the spell on the rank slots, so it's a lose-lose situation. So once you do actually have a standard quality build, which, by the way, looks something like Warrior starting class, 40 Vigor, 40 Endurance, 40 Strength, and 40 Dex. So how do you actually get the most efficiency out of the actual moveset? And the answer is a little bit more complicated, but this weapon does reward perfect spacing really well because the L1s, while they're kind of slow and they're a little short on range, they actually do a pretty decent chunk of damage with an L1 combo. Staying just out of range of an attack and starting an L1 combo as they're finishing their animation is the best way to get damage out of this thing. And, people call that a reactive playstyle, and if you don't like doing that, that's fine. Don't use this or you're not going to do well because you really have to do that. The only real aggressive move you have is the running L1 and the running R1. The running R1 still has the curved sword bug where if they're right next to you, you'll run in place. However, the running L1 is pretty good at roll catching. Even if they roll a little bit early, it's got a multi-hit. It's kind of like the Cestus where it hits multiple times. So if you do the running L1 and they roll a little too early, they'll get hit by the second hit. If they roll too late, they'll get hit by the first hit. So the rolling L1 is really the only good way of applying pressure. Everything else kind of relies on you spacing perfectly and punishing their whiffs. Now, while the R1 does very little damage, it still has its uses. It's faster than the L1s, and the running R1 actually does come out faster than the running L1 as well, so you do have a couple of options for switching up your timings. You'll do way less damage, but it's still good to mix things up every once in a while, and the damage is not, so bad that it's not worth it. So, R1s are still okay to use, but definitely the bulk of your damage is going to come from L1s. And next, there's the actual weapon art with the Dancer's Enchanted Grace bullshit whatever move that they nerfed into oblivion. Basically, this used to be worth using because you could stun lock them for a long ass time and get a bunch of damage off. I say a bunch, it's still only like 700-800. But now there is almost no reason to ever use it The only time you would ever want to use the actual weapon art is if you knew the opponent was going to parry and you didn't have time to run in for a backstab. That's about it. Other than that, it's out-damaged by a single normal L1 combo. It's out-damaged by, like, a normal R1 combo. It does really low damage for the amount of spin-up time, the FP cost, the stamina cost. It makes no sense why they nerfed it that much. But, to answer Enchanted Grace, you really only want to use it when you know the opponent is going to parry and you don't have time to run behind them to backstab them. That's it. I can't think of another reason other than, like, looking cool, I guess. Even the amount of Pontiff Ring buildup you get is like 7 additional. It's just not worth it, pretty much ever, to use this ability. Which sucks, because it used to be kind of fun when it's unlocked for, like, forever, but now, yeah. Don't use it. It's bad. It's bad. So in a nutshell, against, slower weapons, greatsword and slower, you're going to want to play very reactively. You're going to want to dodge a first attack, perfectly space the second, and then hit them with an L1 combo. That'll be the bulk of your damage. Against faster weapons, you're going to do more of a hit-and-run strategy with running L1s and running R1s, and trying your very best to space out attacks and use the L1. Because the L1 is really central to doing the most amount of damage with it. Everything else it has is kind of lackluster in terms of damage, but as long as you stick with, like, a non-gimmick build, you just have a standard quality build, you'll be able to soak some hits. You won't have, 20 vigor. You'll do pretty much as much damage as you can, short of having literally all of your stats be in, the main damaging stats, which is a terrible idea, because then you'll have no vigor or endurance or anything like that. So just play it very safe. You need to make sure you're actually getting the counter hits perfectly, and that's pretty much the best way to use it. L1s are your main bread and butter there, and against weapons that are too fast to space properly like that, you're going to want to use the running L1s and the running R1s. And that's pretty much it. It's very touch and go with it. So that's probably the best way to build it, and the best way to use it is just treating it almost like a slow Ultra Great Sword without hyper armor, kind of. Not slow Ultra Great Sword. It's about the same speed as an Ultra Great Sword with the regular L1. So it's like an Ultra Great Sword without hyper armor. That's an interesting way to look at it. That's the way I play it, and it seems to work out pretty well. So I'm sure people have different play styles, but this is the one that has worked most effectively for me, getting the most out of the fact that it has kind of little damage, so you got to stick with the L1s mostly. But that is pretty much it, guys. I didn't do a narrated thought duels for this one because I'm kind of trying to break away from those for now because they're getting a little repetitive. It's like 80,000 episodes of it, so I hope you enjoyed this, and I will see you next time. Take it easy, guys.